Hey Jabbers, we are back with part two of Wedding Hot Takes, 2025 edition. This hot take episode, we are talking about inviting kids to to your wedding, who your highest paid vendor should be, why we opt for first looks, and a few more topics that will be fun to chat about. So, Gabby, let's dive in. What is your take on having kids at weddings?
Um, I think there should be an end time for the kids at weddings.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so hear me out. There are so many babysitting services. I mean, guys, if you are a couple that's listening to this or past wedding vendor that's obviously been married, there are babysitters for pets. There are pet sitters for those who want to have their dogs walk them down the aisle. And I understand. And a lot of venues say after the ceremony, the dog has to go away. And I think that is very reasonable because I've had from personal experience, dogs jump up on the buffet and grab food from the buffet. So let's not do that. Um, so I kind of think the same thing should be true for kids. I I do think if a couple does, so I think one of our questions that you and I, Carrie, were talking about was like, is it okay to not invite kids to a wedding? And 1000%, I think it is. And if you are a guest that's lucky enough to have been invited to the wedding, I don't think you should throw a hissy fit that your kid can't come. It changes the vibe of the wedding entirely. Um, so I definitely think you should respect that and you should try to find some babysitting accommodations, whether that means you bring your mother or your mother-in-law to the hotel and they can watch the kids while you're out partying. And if you need to leave the wedding earlier, no problem at all. Um, but I also really like the idea of if you want to invite kids to the wedding, that there could be possibly a curfew after dinner.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. However, so it's interesting because we've done a lot of weddings where it's like kids are invited, kids aren't invited. We've had babysitters at weddings. I find that the babysitting companies don't really work at weddings because
Mm.
typically the kids will refuse to go with these people. Even though they have activities set up, they are very clingy to the parents. And then the parent ends up just like spending time with the kid or missing out on the wedding or trying to calm them down. Kind of depends on the age, but I think it's something to consider, especially if you have younger kids who don't really want to leave the parents. Those babysitting services just don't really work out, and then you've kind of paid for this service that isn't being utilized. Um, I personally didn't invite kids to our wedding, except our nieces and nephews, but I think a big thing for us was like my family was so big and I was like we just didn't have the budget to pay to feed everybody, and some of those were like extended cousins of cousins that I like don't even know that well. And I also just find that parents have a much better time when their kids are not present. Like they get to have fun. They like, their partner is there, they're dancing, they're having a couple drinks. Even if they leave early, it's like you both got to show up and be present, and one of you didn't have to step out from the ceremony because your kid was crying or like miss dinner completely, so I feel like there's a lot of positives. I think for me, like, unless you as the couple have a special relationship with that kid, like, why are you inviting them to your wedding? Like, why bother paying for some of these meals that are 100, 200 plus dollars? Even for like a kid's meal, they're still very expensive. So I I think like most weddings shouldn't have kids at them unless they are like family members and stuff. But I know also to each their own. So I think if it's important
Agreed.
to you, do it. If not, don't invite them.
Amen. All right. True or false, and please elaborate. The wedding planner should be one of the highest paid vendors on the wedding team.
I say true, even though I feel like a lot of people might come after me for that. Um, I just think from the amount of hours and the work that a wedding planner puts in for each client's wedding is an insane amount of hours. And it outperforms, I think, any vendor really in the category. Granted, catering, rentals, like those things are more of a fixed cost for like food and stuff like that, like flowers. But honestly, I mean, I don't know, Gabby, if you keep track of how many hours you put into a wedding, but I
Just
know
started
most
this year.
planners estimate like 300 to 500 hours prior to the day of, especially like we're planning with most people for a year, and there's not really like a set limit of hours, right? Like most clients for us have unlimited access to us via email. Like, granted, we have a lot of number of meetings that they can have, but if you take into the account of we are communicating via email for like a year, that's an insane amount of hours and time that we are spending with these clients. So I think that we deserve to be paid a pretty penny, but I know also, like you have mentioned, like our service is not a necessity for some people or to for certain venues, and so it can be an added luxury for people.
True, but I
What do you
agree
think?
with yeah, I agree with you that I do think planners should be one of the highest paid on the team because at the end of the day, they are the project manager of the whole thing. I'm not saying they are the best at, they're not the boss, they're not whatever, but do all vendors not come to the planner to troubleshoot things? Yes. Do the clients not just come to the planner for questions and concerns? Yes. I feel like we definitely have a lot of weight on our shoulders when it comes to making sure everything goes smoothly. Like that's on us. And we absolutely need a killer vendor team to be part of that. So I am not saying they're not important. We absolutely need that. And I think photographers are probably screaming saying, but we have the photos that they keep forever. And like, yeah, absolutely. And to that I would also say, but if they don't have a planner, there's maybe it could be chaotic. There might not be photos to have time to take because how many times have we heard about photographers that have to step in as a coordinator if there's no
Hmm.
coordinator on the day? And I feel terrible for those photographers because that's out of their scope of work. It should not be their responsibility to coordinate the wedding. They should be focusing on their craft and their, you know, specialty. So, yeah, I do think we should be
I
the most
mean,
paid.
yeah. And listen, like we put in a lot of hours, and yeah, I agree. Like we are not dismissing anyone's importance in their role. But I think just from like if we're looking at facts of how many hours we put in prior to the wedding and then day of, like a lot of vendors are like, "Oh, what time did you get here?" And I'm like 8 a.m. and I'm not leaving till 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Like we typically have also the longest day on site that we are managing the entire day. Like I've worked for a florist before showing up and I was like, this is amazing. I get to show up at 10 a.m. and then leave at 5 and I have, nothing to worry about after that. So
So true.
that's my stance and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't come at us though. We need every single vendor on the team,
Yes,
but I will
100%.
say it does hurt when I see that a client paid an insane amount for a photographer and are like
Mhm.
trying to wheel and deal us, you know? And I'm like,
Yep.
and that's a client issue. That's like them not acknowledging the value that we provide, or perhaps it's our issue that we're not showing the value that we provide. And that's a
Right.
conversation for another day. But
Yep.
um, but that's that.
Yep. Okay. First looks. I am always opting to tell clients that I think you should see each other prior to walking down the aisle. Um, my biggest thing is like you get a private moment on your own to see each other, do private vows, hang out, do whatever you want that to look like. Get some fun photos prior instead of cramming all of the photos in post ceremony. But also my biggest thing is like a lot of people don't get married until the evening, right? Like your ceremony's at 5, 6 o'clock. And I'm like, you are missing almost
Mm.
the entire day with your significant other. like, why not see them early afternoon and get that first look and spend more time with them with your wedding party if you have one? So I always try to really opt for the first look, even though sometimes clients will be like, but I really want that moment of walking down the aisle. But I try to tell them
Yeah.
it's going to be just as special. Like, you're still going to have that moment of like seeing them coming down the aisle, and it still feels like really amazing.
That is so true. I just had this conversation with a couple because they thought, I mean, that aisle scene is very romanticized as it should be, but I think movies make it like, oh my God, I got chills. And no movie is like focusing on the first look. Like that's not as dramatic as all your guests seeing you for the first time. So I had this conversation with a couple literally just yesterday and they really want to do down the aisle. And I said, great. You've also said you want to join cocktail hour. And let me tell you, you can't do both because what are you doing during cocktail hour? If you don't do a first look, you're doing photos because you won't have been able to take them all before. And that immediately they were like, screw it, we're doing a first look because we absolutely want to join cocktail hour. And so I think it's obviously a personal preference, but it's our job as vendors to show the pros and cons of these types of like programming things and say we can't just be like, great, sounds good, noted. Like we should still do our due diligence and say, okay, great, a few things to keep in mind when you walk down the aisle for, and see each other for the first time, the time leading up to it, you can't do XYZ and da 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 and da da da. And I love you mentioned the private vows. I think that's something that a lot of my couples have been doing because they do not like the attention on them for a very long period of time during the ceremony. So they've been opting to do their
Mhm.
more private personal vows during the first look and then doing this more somewhat traditional short ceremony and then get to the party. So personal preference, of course, but it's important to list the pros and cons.
I think that's such a good point about like hospitality, right? Because you were really listening to your client about them wanting to do a first look down the aisle, but also wanting to do cocktail hour. And I think that's so key, right? Like we're listening to what our clients really want, but then giving them the logistics or our best advice. And then it helps them to kind of realize like, well, which one is more important for you, the first look down the aisle or being a part of cocktail hour? And I think just being able to educate and listen to what they're wanting and their needs is great because then they're like, oh, forget about it. That's not that important to me because I really want to be a part of cocktail hour. And that usually happens with my clients too. I'm like, look, you have family photos, a giant wedding party, and you want sunset portraits. Like that is going to take an entire hour to get that done. So
So true.
I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
if you haven't listened to the hospitality episodes, it's 2 episodes ago, I believe episode 29. So make sure you listen to that one if you haven't already, because we do a nice little deep dive into our state of the industry when it comes to hospitality. Okay, thoughts on weddings being a luxury, like a non-essential part of life and a luxury. What are your thoughts on that and how the price point in general of having a wedding is up there now?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, a wedding is a luxury because you're spending I guess like having a true traditional wedding is a luxury because you are spending now like thousands and thousands of dollars to host people for an evening. Essentially you're giving 150 people free food and booze for like 5, 6 hours, and that's a pretty penny. Um, because you could just go to the courthouse and get married or have like a really small wedding. But I think, weddings have greatly changed since our parents, got married. Even in the last 10 years that we've been in business, weddings have changed. So I think depending what you want it to look like, but it can be more luxury, ultra luxury on the high end. But I think hosting any event like that is a luxury for people.
Yeah. And to couples that are hesitant, or, if you're a wedding vendor and you're listening and you've got couples that are hesitant to spend the money on a wedding, obviously it's our industry, it's our career. So we want them to continue to have weddings. Something that I tell them if you think about it, the group of people you were inviting to this day will never again be together. Not for a funeral, not for a birthday party, not for any other reason, because you are really combining the favorite people of you and your partner. And these people are coming from out of state, out of the country, out of so many places and coming there for this one big day. So, yes, they're more expensive. There is more at stake. And you are wining and dining your friends and family at a higher per person cost. But never again will this event be replicated in your life. So, that usually makes them think like, damn, yeah, we need everybody there and we want to have an epic party and weekend. But it does not define a marriage either. You don't have to have a wedding to, a wedding of this size to have a good marriage. So, take that into consideration and but let's hope weddings continue on for the sake of our careers.
100%. I love that. I think that's like a really special thing of just considering having all of those people in one place because it's so true. It really doesn't happen often. Sorry, can we cut this short? Riley
Yep.
is like screaming and freaking
Oh my
out.
God. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay. Okay.
You did the intro for this, right?
Yeah, I
Okay,
I can do the outro. Or yeah, you want
I
to do
think
it?
you did
Go
the
ahead.
intro. Yeah, I'll do
Okay.
the outro. Um, all right, Jabbers. Well, this is another mini-sode of some wedding hot takes that we hope you enjoyed. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you thought is true, false, what you agree or disagree with. As always, you can find us on Instagram, send us a DM, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.